Welcome back to the Entrepreneurial SME. And if you've just joined the program, we are asking if entrepreneurship is a realistic path to tackling unemployment. My guests, Matshepo Koape from GIBS EDA and Dr. Corrin Varady from IDEA Digital Education. Matshepo, I sit a lot with entrepreneurs in this space where they sit where you sit. And two things that come to mind every time. They need money and they need access to markets.
Yes.
Right? I'm hearing you guys talk about education and skills and this, and they say we want money and we want access to markets.
Yeah. So I think there's a strong case to be made for access to skills, which we've just discussed. Follow on, yes, you're right. Access to markets and access to funding remain critical, because if you don't have a market to sell to, then you're not going to make the money, and then you need money to grow your business. And so what we found in our studies that entrepreneurs need financial products that cater for their businesses, because current financial mechanisms are quite stringent in terms of the requirements, and they're very onerous, and you don't want entrepreneurs not to engage with that, because ultimately they need to fund their businesses to grow and to scale. So one of the things that that is an opportunity for us to educate around what are the types of funding mechanisms, because I think funding itself, it's a journey, and we need to prepare entrepreneurs with an understanding of what is the funding landscape, what does that look like, what is the type of funding that is suitable for your business, is it grant, is it equity? And so again, that financial readiness is very important to impart on the entrepreneurs. And then second to that is the access to markets. And so again, linking entrepreneurs to opportunities to access supply chains, but also be able to do business on the digital marketplace. I think what we've seen also in the research is that entrepreneurs are starting to embrace digital marketplaces as a platform to sell their products and tap into a wider consumer base. And so what that means is that in order for them to provide at that scale, it needs for us to then help them with the manufacturing capability to be able to service the order that they would receive, and how do they then put operating systems in place to be able to satisfy the requirements of supply chains and or customers.
Corrin, who is doing this well in the world, and what should we be copying from them?
I think South Africa, we've got to give credit to ourselves. I do actually think, we are doing it well. There are a range of programs that are out there. There's a lot of funding that's certainly being sunk into the SME development space, and there are a lot of training programs that are looking at mentorship. I think we've got to be very careful in looking at, well, what's that return on investment? So I do think that that's one area that we need to look at. The other area, India is a perfect example, and so is Southeast Asia, of how microfinance loans totally transformed their economy through SME development. And that occurred during the 90s and after the bust that occurred in Asia. It almost transformed their economy to the point that it is today, wholly in and of itself. So I do think that we have lots of lessons, that we can learn from what happened, particularly when we start looking at that capital and where do people find capital. Unfortunately, there's been microfinance funding and debt funding that has occurred, and I agree with Matshepo. We have to think wider than that. Sometimes that's not appropriate for the businesses that they're looking at here in South Africa. We need to think about, how do we look at grants? How do we actually look at the impact of those grants, and how do we measure the impact of programs that may mentor and therefore may be investing in these businesses, and what their throughput rate is? Because a lot of these entrepreneurs are currently taking out a lot of debt finance, and sometimes they get swamped by it, and then there's a major challenge. But if we go back to that microfinance model that occurred in Southeast Asia, we're talking from Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand,
so Corrin,
and India.
We don't have much time, and I want us to give some hope. We don't want to depress people here. Give me one or two things that we're doing well currently from an entrepreneurship point of view in building SMEs.
I think we are prioritizing it. So I think that's one of the great things. I think that that's happening at both public and private sector. I think we're developing the priorities around digital skills, which I think is exactly to Matshepo's point around we need digital literacy to be at the forefront. And I do believe that we see hope that the redefinition of what is an entrepreneur is occurring as we speak. And that doesn't mean that it just needs to be a formal business owner, but actually we take in an entire ecosystem.
What are the, as we conclude, are the lessons that you drew from your study saying that there is still appetite for entrepreneurship?
Absolutely, and I think the appetite is demonstrated very well when we go into the townships and engage with entrepreneurs to understand the very title of this research is their lived experience. And so we are hopeful that entrepreneurship is thriving, and even though there's constraints, entrepreneurs are resourceful. They have an agency, they're resilient, and are able to find solutions of how can I satisfy my customers, even though I don't have the equipment, but through competition, I'm able to go to my competitor to get that equipment in order for me to do business. So definitely collaboration, we're seeing it at in the entrepreneur space, and therefore I think it's encouraging that we're moving in the right direction.
Matshepo and Corrin, 15 minutes was never enough to have this conversation, but it's a good start. And thank you very much for your time. Thank you for watching the Entrepreneurial SME. From me, Rams Mabote, good night and God bless.
Your trusted connectivity partner, Telkom Business, proudly brings you the Entrepreneurial SME Show.